Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. This is stage 6 of the Giro d'Italia 2023. Now, today's race at 163 kilometers long with 2 category climbs to get over on today's stage. One's a Cat 2, so it's pretty stiff at over 6%, but not crazy long, talking about 6 kilometers. And then the second climb at 9 kilometers, but only 4%, it's a category 3. So there's some obstacles on today's race, but with about 55 kilometers to go, it's going to flatten out, small little bumps after that, but then coming into the finish completely flat when we look at the profile. So everybody's thinking, right, this should be a field sprint, no doubt about it. Well, it should be a field sprint, but when we're down here in the south of Italy, these roads are going to be crazy small, technical, all day long. 163 kilometer course, and I mean it's going to be technical all over the place. Now, when the riders leave in the neutral section, we're going to see Remco Evenepoel at the back of the peloton. He's looking pretty good for a kid who just got done crashing twice on yesterday's stage 5. But Remco Evenepoel there in the rainbow band jerseys looking just fine at the start of today's race. Slowly after the beginning of the neutral section, once we get a little bit further into it, we see Remco Evenepoel and we see Mads Pedersen having a chat. That's Trek Segafredo, right? For sure, they're chatting a little bit about yesterday's incident. And Remco Evenepoel had apologized to the Trek Segafredo riders, and the Trek Segafredo riders had apologized after yesterday's stage 2. So everything's good. This is what happens in bike racing. A lot of stuff happens, the tension's high, and sometimes you just don't see things right. So I'm sure Remco Evenepoel later, when he got back to the hotel room and he looked at a replay and saw the look over his shoulder and the little bit of drift, he knows he's at fault. Now, is Trek Segafredo at fault too? Certainly they're a little bit at fault. Alex Kirsch, that came up with first rider to hit Remco Evenepoel, he's a little bit in blame. Always accidents are never just one person. It usually takes 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10 sometimes in bike racing. So both parties apologize and we're into the bike race. Now later on we're going to see an interview, and it's going to come from Alberto Danesi, who had a relegation in yesterday's finishing sprint from 4th to the back of the group, and that moved Cavendish up. Now in his interview he's saying, hey, I didn't see Cav. And that's why I said Cav was at fault in yesterday's sprint finish. When he moved out with 100 meters to go and his back wheel slipped and he looked over his shoulder and he moved back in, that's like jumping on the 405 freeway from a dead stop. And what Alberto Danesi describes is he says he saw Cavendish move to the left and that was it. After that, he didn't see him again. And that's what I know he's experiencing when I'm up here on the Butterfly Effect telling you guys the stories. As many times I've been in that situation, once the rider gets out of the way, his focus, Alberto Danesi, is going to be on the riders directly in front of him, and he sees the open gap. You have to remember, it's been raining all day, it's been crazy, it's been chaos, and they're sprinting at 100%, so the blood pressure's high, the heart rate's high, everything's going high except for your vision because they can't see anything. So once he sees Cavendish move, once he does his extreme left movement, and there is no arguing about that. So I don't really mind them relegating him, but I don't believe anything was done on purpose from Danesi. And in his interview, the way he describes it is the same way that I saw the race yesterday when I was calling up here on the Butterfly Effect. That's why when you see other Twitter accounts out there talking about Brian Smith from GCN, when he blames Alberto Danesi and he sends you a description that says, well, Cav just moved over a little bit. Cav moved over a lot, and what Brian Smith is forgetting to tell you guys, Cav moved over doing 5, 10 kilometers an hour slower than that group was coming. It's wet and nobody can see. That's why Cav was at fault for yesterday's race up here on the Butterfly Effect anyways. He was the first to cause it. What happened after that is other people's faults too. So like I said, the relegation, I don't mind with Danesi, but I think Cav should have been relegated to the back of the field too with that crazy movement. Now, as the racing gets started here on stage 6, we're going to see 5 riders go up the road, and Simon Clark is in this front group, the Australian rider, stage winner of the Tour de France last year on the cobblestones, and he's got some company with Alessandro Di Marchi up front, and along with those two is going to be Francisco Gavesi from Iolo Cometa, Alexander Delettre from Cofidis, and Charlie Cordeman from Coratec. Those 5 riders, are going to go up the road, and they're going to start getting the gap right away. We're going to see one rider back there from Marquez Samsic chasing like crazy, but he's not going to get on, so let's not count him in today's stage. Even though he put on a valiant effort, they were trying to stay out for a long time until finally he's going to get caught by the peloton. Behind, what's happening in the peloton? Well, they had a little bit of a crash, the first little hiccup early in today's race, and we're going to see Gaviria from Movistar get tied up in that. UAE team members aren't going to have much luck. We're going to see another wheel change or bike change there for Jonathan Milan from Bahrain Victorious, but it looks like everybody's okay, and they'll get back up to the peloton. Now, when we get up to the peloton, they're all going curb to curb, right? This is a problem, and nobody wants to take control of today's race. Why don't they want to take control? Well, with a Category 2 climb and then a longer Category 3 on today's stage, they're not certain this is the perfect stage for the sprinters. And when we're talking about racing down here in the south of Italy on these narrow roads, we don't know for sure which team is going to take control of the peloton. So that break of 5, their time gap gets up to about 4.5, 5-minute gap on the peloton. This is a problem on today's stage when we're talking about narrow, technical, crazy climbs and crazy descents in today's race, because it's hard for the peloton behind to just start chasing with 20 riders back there from 5 different teams when you only have half a team left when you start getting over these first KOMs. Well, the peloton finally gets organized. We're going to see Trek Segafredo, DSM start chasing. But when we get into the first climb on today's stage 6, that gap is already up to 4.5 minutes and then 5 minutes into the climb proper. All of a sudden, Ineos get on the front back there and they start drilling it. Now there's a little conversation happening with GCN while we're in this climbing part of the race with Team Ineos on the front. Adam Blythe is talking about, well, they're just up there pulling just because they want to put some hurt on some of the riders back there. No, they're not pulling for that reason at all. They're only pulling so that they go up this climb at the front of the group, drop down the crazy, dangerous, technical descents, and keep their guys, Theo Gegenhardt and G. Thomas, out of trouble and at front. Now, when we're talking about these climbs, they're always a little wet down here because it's been raining a lot here in the south of Italy for this Giro d'Italia in 2023. So that is the main reason you see Ineos on the front. Has nothing to do with trying to hurt the GC guys back there. It's just to keep their guys in good position. Now, when we drop down the first KOM descent and we drop all the way into the crazy technical part of this course, we're going to see UAE team members on the front for a bit, and they have a sprinter, Pascal Ackermann, so maybe they're interested in that. Maybe they're interested just keeping their GC rider Almeida out of trouble through all the chaos roads here in the south of Italy. Once they come down that, they start coming up the next climb. And things are getting interesting because Mark Cavendish has already been dropped with his teammates back there, Astana, chasing like crazy, but he has no hope of getting back to this front group. We've seen bigger groups on the first KOM just hurting back there with 2 guys from Quick-Step wrapped in there and a bunch of Alpecin de Koenig riders. But when we get onto the final climb, the group away at 5 now, at the time gap coming down to 2.5, 2 minutes, 15 seconds, this is when Alessandro Di Marchi, he knows he needs to go on the attack, so he throws in the first attack, and this is going to blow up this group of 5. We'll see Simon Clark, he'll look back over his shoulder, then he'll throw in a massive acceleration. This will break this group of 5 down to 2 riders with Simon Clark driving it on the front, and Alessandro Di Marchi holding on as the 2 are sharing the workload going up this final KOM on stage 6. When they reach the top, the gap is at 2 minutes, 15 seconds. This was a perfect tactical plan from these 2 riders because there was no more time to give up. Once they go down the backside, again, it's a technical, crazy descent. We'll see in the peloton behind, riders on the front. We got Remco Evenepoel and his teammates sitting 2nd and 3rd position so they can keep the rainbow jersey and GC favorite here at the Giro d'Italia out of trouble as we come off this final technical descent to start the flat section here on stage 6. Now the 2 riders up front, they're throwing in everything on this flat section. We see the roads are still narrow. They're in towns throughout every part of this course unless they were going up. And then if they were going down, like I said, it was a dangerous construction zone course throughout the descents. And now as we're in the town, it's not getting any better, guys. The fans are just pushing in hard on each side of the road, looking thick and heavy here, but celebrating the Giro d'Italia, passing their roads. Now, the only problem is there's still all kinds of road obstacles here. When we look back to the peloton, Trek Segafredo's on the front with just one guy pulling on the flat section with 55 kilometers to go in today's stage. They're going to need some more help, but the two riders up front, they're thinking this is great. It's not organized back there. People are hurting, and they have been. It was a rough stage yesterday, so they just can't get help on these smaller roads on stage 6. Now, with the gap up front still holding at about 2.5 minutes to the two riders, we know that there's going to need multiple teams back there to start chasing, and with about 30 kilometers to go, this is when we see Gaviria come up to the side of the peloton. He's chatting a little bit with Trek Segafredo, throwing his arm out there. You know, he's saying, hey, we're trying, but what can we do, man? We're hurting on today's stage. Albacin DeKunik come up there. They're arguing a little bit with what looks like to be UAE Team Emirates, because they want some help back there for their sprinter Pascal Ackerman, but none of the teams want to do any work. Every time you go to the front, it's always Trek Segafredo up there. Bahrain victorious. DSM have been generous with their efforts here on stage 6 too. And then finally, we start getting some more help. Albacin DeKunik will come to the front, but I don't actually know if they pulled much. But Movistar did come to the front and they started pulling. So we got at least 4, if not 5 teams on the front of the peloton trying to bring back the 2 riders. The 3 riders that were dropped from the 2 up front, they got all wrapped up. Now there's just the 2 guys left with under 30 kilometers to go. As we see the group back there pulling as hard as they can, things start getting really interesting now, because all of a sudden Team Ineos come to the front with 17 kilometers to go. They want to keep all their guys out of trouble on these crazy roads, and that's why they're at the front. It's not to hurt the peloton back there. It's just to keep their guys out of trouble. And then with about 15 kilometers to go, Primoz Roglic, Jumbo-Visma, the second big-time GC favorite to win the Giro, he's got a bike issue. He's got to go over to the side of the road, change bikes. He'll jump on his spare bike. He'll start drilling hard. He's got a couple teammates waiting for him. Sam Oman's back there, and Thomas Gloag back there is waiting. And as we see Primoz Roglic go flying by his 2 teammates, he's got some form, and he doesn't have time to wait here with 15 kilometers to go, and the gap's down to about a minute time on the 2 riders up front. Now, with Primoz Roglic going full gas back there, all of a sudden we see Rowan Dennis wait for Primoz Roglic. They get together. Thomas Gloag is there, and the 3 riders are pulling 100% to bring Primoz Roglic back up to the back end of the peloton. After they enter into the Palace Royale, all of a sudden Jumbo-Visma's back together and everything's nice. Then you look at Rowan Dennis as he's on the rough roads. Rowan Dennis drops his chain too. So this is what can happen on these last stages. There is nothing safe until you cross today's finish line about today's stage 6 at all. When you looked at the profile, you thought it's a sprinter stage. But this stage is chaos throughout the whole stage. And now we're going to see some more, because with 12.5 kilometers to go, it's Simon Clark going through the right turn. He's got Alessandro Di Marche locked onto his wheel. When they come out of the right, all of a sudden there's an island in the center of the road. 3 poles, 2 separate islands. And what does Simon Clark do? Well, he's got a bunny hop straight through the middle. You see him catch some air there on his wheels. And then Di Marche is going into this blind because he's second position, right? Luckily, he's a tall rider, so maybe he got just a little bit of a glimpse of what's coming up, because all of a sudden Di Marche lifts up the bike too with a little bunny hop and clears the second island. Both riders come out on the left side of the road. They start sprinting up the slight drag of the hill, but you know, at 1 minute behind the peloton coming through at full gas, it's gonna get crazy. Now as the peloton hits this right turn, the peloton goes crazy through all kinds of different sections to pass that island, as some are passing before it, some are passing in the middle, some are passing right after. But when you look at the leftover debris, Geraint Thomas dropped his chain just after the island there, and he's sitting in the middle of the road. As we see the Jumbo-Visma rider almost hit Geraint Thomas, who's been over his bike trying to get his chain on as fast as he can, because there's 11.5 kilometers to go. We look up at the front of the peloton. Ineos were near the front and at the front at times just before this. And finally, they get the word that G. Thomas is in trouble. 2 Ineos riders will pull over to the side of the road, and they're going to wait for G. Thomas. Now, G. Thomas is back there in the car. You think, man, he's going to get on no problem, right? Well, it's 11.5 kilometers to go, and I'm here to tell you, on a stage like today, there is nothing safe, and I've already said it, and let me say it again. This race can blow up at any point in time when we're talking about 10K to go. Now, Geraint Thomas, he gets some help from the big man. It's Filippo Ganna back there that's waiting for him. They got some help from the car. Salvatore Puccio's back there. Ben Swift dropped off to help out the British rider, as we got 4 Ineos riders back there trying to bring Geraint Thomas on. But up front, when we look at the peloton, look when they're coming out of the roundabouts and the turns. It's blowing up at the front. If it's blowing up at the front, you know it's going to blow up in the back. Ineos are in big time trouble. Red alert signs going off all over the place. Now all of a sudden, Filippo Ganna's full gas, but we look, the peloton's blowing up in the back. We see that group of about 20 riders, 15 riders dropping off there. Luckily for Ineos, they left just a tad bit of room on the left side there for Filippo Ganna just to stay on the gas. Full TGV train back there for Geraint Thomas so he doesn't have to slow down, but it's a nail biter as they thread the island and the group of riders getting dropped. Filippo Ganna does a great job. Then we see the team car go flying past Ineos riders as it's coming up to Sepp Kuss, who's dropping off of the back of the peloton, the American rider. They're dropping down a slight little descent, and they're going to have a roundabout to come through. I don't know how the car did it, but the car threaded the needle, missed Sepp Kuss, who stayed all the way to the left side, past him just before the roundabout, and the car stayed full gas through the roundabout with the Ineos train being led by Filippo Ganna behind, going full into the roundabout, comes out of the roundabout, and then they pass Sepp Kuss. They go full gas, get back on their car. Now it looks like we got official motorcycle up front there that'll pull over to the side there of the Ineos car, and I gotta believe he's starting to have some talks here with the Ineos driver as it looks like they're getting a little too much help from the car. Well, we look just up a little bit in front of the cars there and stuff, and we can see the back of the peloton. So Filippo Ganna's going full gas as he passes the car and closes up to the gap here on the peloton with about 6.5, 7 kilometers to go. Filippo Ganna has got G. Thomas onto the back of the peloton. Now Filippo Ganna, he looks over at his teammate Salvatore Puccio, and as they look at each other, you know they're just going, whew, man, that was tight. Only problem is, while Filippo Ganna was looking right, not drifting left, but his teammate Geraint Thomas was coming around him on the left, following Ben Swift's wheel, comes over, almost takes out the front wheel there of Filippo Ganna. Now, like yesterday's Remco Evenepoel, if Filippo Ganna had looked right and drifted left, the opposite of Remco Evenepoel, they would have collided wheels and Filippo Ganna would have went down. Instead, because Filippo Ganna never drifted, he caught it last minute, swerved a little bit to the right. Geraint Thomas passes his front wheel without tapping it, and then gives him the little fist bump out to the side saying, sorry bro, but thanks for the help. I got to get to the front, as he got Ben Swift in front of him. Now up front, what was happening? Time gaps coming down to 50, 40 seconds as we see the two riders are starting to throw in with about 5 kilometers to go. This is when you really start seeing the ugly faces up front from Simon Clark and Alessandro Di Marquez. You can tell they're really hurting. Go back to the front of the peloton. Oh my goodness, who was on the front? It's Pasqualon. Andreas Pasqualon from Bahrain Victorious is on the front. Guys, this is a bad sign right here. This is the last lead out man for Johnny Milan. If Pasqualon is on the front right now, you know there's trouble and there's nobody left back there to help. He's got just one Movistar rider on the front helping him. And then shortly after that, as they start to get swarmed, all of a sudden, Pasqualon is blowing and going back with about 4.5 kilometers to go. That's it. Bahrain Victorious is off the front. Trek Segafredo is off the front. Alpecin de Koenig, who I don't ever think was really on the front, never was there. DSM has lost the front. You got one Movistar rider up there. We start to see Ineos come to the front. Again, guys, they're not coming in the front right now to close this 25, 30-second gap on the two riders up front. They just want to keep their man out of trouble. And then they got some other company on the left of them as it's Bora Hansgrohe. We got GC teams driving at the front because, again, this is a dangerous stage 6 at Giro d'Italia as the two teams are drag racing down the side, but it wouldn't be full gas like you would normally see with a sprinter team. So now I'm thinking, sitting on the Chesterfield, Simon Clark, Di Marquez, you got this stage 1. You guys just got to go to the finish. Now, all of a sudden, with 1.8 kilometers to go, they come out of this left turn. It's a little bit of a cobblestone drag back there for the two riders, but they still got about a 23-second gap on the peloton behind. Somehow, I don't know how it happened, but Trek Segafredo found one more reserve rider up there, Bach Mollema, I believe it is, and Pasqualon, the last lead-out man for Bahrain Victorious back there, he has somehow come out of the grave to do a couple more small pulls at the front with Trek Segafredo. The gap is still about 20 seconds when we're coming into 1.5, 1.6 3 kilometers to go. Now all of a sudden at 1 kilometer to go, this is when we start seeing some tactical games being played up front, and the peloton behind has got these guys in their sights. We first got to hesitate at the front. DeMarque, he knows he's not as fast as Simon Clark, so he starts sitting on. Simon Clark's looking back, DeMarque's looking back. Simon Clark's like, no way, I'm not going to pull you all the way to the finish. They don't have much time to play around. The peloton's in sight now. 700 meters to go. DeMarque finally takes a pull, but only for about 100 meters. 600 meters to go. It's Simon Clark on the front. 500 meters to go. Simon Clark going zigzag on the course. This is not going to help you guys get to the finish. We look behind. It's curb to curb. Movistar's been on the front pulling. Now they're starting to blow. Simon Clark will pull up to just about 350 meters to go. Then DeMarque is going to throw in his attack. Only problem is it's a little bit too late, because at 300 meters to go, Simone Consoni from Cofidis has jumped from the peloton behind as they're catching the 2 breakaway riders up here on stage 6 that for sure were going to win today's stage, but now have given it away as they're getting wrapped up. Consoni, though, the only problem is he figures this is still too far to go as he backs off a little bit. Fernando Gaviria, Movistar, the Colombian rider who followed Consoni, now he jumps and throws in his attack at about 275. He's going all the way to the left side barriers because the road's going to bend a little bit to the left as he goes. Simone Consoni follows. Just behind Consoni, Mads Pedersen, Trek Segafredo's there, and then Bahrain victorious Johnny Milan, winner here at the stage of the Giro already in 2023. He's sitting 4th, 5th wheel back there right on Mads Pedersen. Mads Pedersen, though's got one good thing on his side. He's coming up on the fast on the Simone Consoni. He slingshots past Simone Consoni. Then with about 150 meters to go, he's back in the draft there of Fernando Gaviria and flying up. You look over to the right there of Mads Pedersen. Johnny Milan is stuck in the wind while Mads Pedersen's getting a slingshot off the Colombian, going full gas at 100 meters. They're coming side by side, 70 meters. We look, Mads Pedersen's got just about a nudge there on Fernando Gaviria as his legs are starting to blow. Then all of a sudden with 440 meters to go before the line, Trek Segafredo, Mads Pedersen's got it wrapped up. Johnny Milan will cross the line for second on today's stage. Pascal Ackermann, UAE team members, will throw his bike at the line to round out a podium spot here. And then over to the other sides, Caden Groves on the right side. He'll get 4th and 5th will be Fernando Gaviria on today's stage. The 2 breakaway riders, when they finally crossed the line at the back of the peloton, when they gave their interviews, both riders looked dejected. Of course, DeMarque was just talking about how he wished they had some more power from the younger kids in the break that would have went with them up the climb. But if they can't go with you, they can't go with you. And if you're going to start playing games right at the finish, what 1.2 kilometers to go, you're not going to win today's stage with a 20-second gap back there on the peloton. Simon Clark, when he's given the interview, the kid, one of the older guys here in the peloton at 36 years old, he's almost in tears, it looks like, as he's dejected about losing an opportunity to win a stage of the Giro d'Italia. Now, what happened in terms of the GC favorites? Well, while we saw Mads Pedersen roaring across today's line to win the stage 6, we see the other Viking still in the race leader's jersey, DSM. Luknesen will keep the race leader's jersey as no changes came in the top 10 of the general classification, but was a spectacular day of racing for everybody here on stage 6 of the Giro d'Italia. Now, tomorrow's stage, big time mountain stage here, and going to be the first big battle that we see with the GC favorites. Almost 220 kilometers in length with the last summit finish that's steep all the way up to the finish here on stage 7 of the Giro. So make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next edition, the very first big time battle in the mountains here at the Giro to come on tomorrow's Butterfly Effect. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys real soon.